study,
and play come together on a Windows 11 PC.
And for a limited time, college students get
The best of both worlds.
Get the Unreal College Deal. Everything you need to study and play with select Windows 11 PCs. Eligible students get a year of Microsoft 365 Premium and a year of Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with a custom color Xbox wireless controller. Learn more at windows.com/student offer. While supplies last. Ends June 30th. Terms at aka.ms/collegepc.
That point in my life, I'd really only seen ChatGPT used to make jokes on the internet. And that was pretty much the extent of my AI exposure, and I was fairly against the idea of it integrating. So after going through a couple sessions, I discovered that there might actually be a way that we can integrate these tools into our newsrooms. And so over the following months, we gathered a little committee of editors within that regional group. We select figuring out how can we use these the right way to improve what we're doing in our newsrooms.
This is Small Press, Big Ideas, a podcast about the business of local news in the United States. I'm your host, Paul Goertz. Small Press, Big Ideas is about the opportunities and challenges that local news publishers are facing for their businesses. I'll sit down and talk with journalists, entrepreneurs, nonprofit leaders, and more in the local news industry to find out what's working, what isn't, and how the local news ecosystem can innovate and flourish in the 21st century. My guest today on the podcast is Eli Wohlenhaus. He's the Director of Digital and AI News Strategy at Adams Multimedia. And I was just saying, Eli, AI is kind of going crazy right now, so I'm glad to be able to sit down and have a conversation with you about it. And thank you, though, for taking the time.
Yeah. I appreciate coming on. It's a hot topic, and it's something that I, maybe two and a half years ago, I would not have had much to say on it, and a lot has changed since then.
That's crazy. I just had a guy on the podcast, hasn't gone out yet, named Pete Paschal. He has a podcast called The Media Copilot. It's about AI and journalism. And just when you're talking about how fast it's moved, he's like, my workflow today in March is drastically different than it was in January. Like, if that gives you for like how much has changed. Anyway, I'm going off the rails already. It's our first time meeting, and the audience too. Could you just tell us a little bit about your background, like you kind of alluded to there, your background in journalism, AI, all this stuff, kind of what's led you to where you are now?
Yeah, sure thing. So to quick rewind is I graduated from Missouri State University with a degree in journalism, 16. My goal was to be in broadcast television, more than likely. I think, deep down, I wanted to be your typical former athlete, want to work in sports. So I worked for the student newspaper. I tried to make a focus on sports, and then I got a chance to be the editor-in-chief of the student newspaper. Shout out to those listeners who worked for student media. It was a really rewarding time. Learned a lot from that. And then after graduating, pretty typical story. I applied to all the jobs, hundreds of jobs. It's not uncommon that journalists have to put a lot of feelers out there all the way, all across the country. And then that was it for a while. There was no tie to journalism. It was really tough to find my home. And then my story to get to where I am today, of course, there's luck involved. So I walked into a local newspaper office and I said, hey, I'd been out of school for a couple years. I hadn't really done much in the way of journalism. And I said, what do you have in the way of freelance opportunities for high school sports? I thought, at Friday nights, I could go cover high school football, write a gamer, and just get some clips because it'd been a while. I wanted to make sure I stayed fresh. Unfortunately at first, they said they didn't have any opportunities. And then fortunately, the editor there, her name's Megan Katie. I'm very grateful to her because she just connected me to the HR rep for the company. And I thought, okay. Turns out they were hiring for a military publications editor. And I thought, well, I didn't serve. My parents didn't serve. I know a few people who have. At the time, why not? Interview went well. They offered me the job a couple hours later. And, we can talk more about my life at Adams Multimedia since then. But it was good luck, good timing. And I'm very grateful to have gotten that opportunity to start here.
Very cool. It's funny. It's this kind of trend I've noticed on the show recently. Out of all my guests, because the show's like about, sustainability and local news
Mm-hmm.
and business model and all this stuff. And like 30 or 40%, I want to say, of my guests have a background in like sports or are interested in like local sport. It's just interesting to me. That comes up again and
Yeah.
again. You say you were an
Yeah,
athlete.
and
What was your sport? I was just curious.
well, I say that. I did play basketball. I enjoyed playing lots of sports, but I officially played basketball.
Gotcha.
I was very good in practice. Let's just say that. Not as good as it got for me.
So, yeah, I was just curious. So could you talk a little bit, I haven't had anybody from Adams, I don't believe, on the show, Adams Multimedia. Could you talk a little bit about the organization and then kind of your role there?
Yeah.
I'll let you talk about it, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So Adams Multimedia, it's really their focus is local newsrooms across the country. I think they're in 20, 21 states now. And primarily, you're going to find Adams Multimedia newspapers in small to mid-sized markets. I think our largest markets are Cedar Rapids and Boise, Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and Boise, Idaho. And otherwise, a lot of smaller towns, smaller communities, mid-sized communities across the 20 states that we're in. And that's really the focus, local journalism. And there are some fantastic editors in the company that I get a chance to learn a lot from, which is great.
Very cool. And yeah, kind of like I alluded to before, the show is probably going to be pretty heavy on the AI side. I don't know if all my listeners, I talk about it in every episode, no matter who comes on. But anyway, it's a huge theme on the show and the world. And it's really been going crazy the last couple of months with the rise of agentic AI and everything like that. And so I'm excited to talk to you about it. Could you talk a little bit about your role? I have a quote from, I think, when you started this position. It says, quote, working with our newsrooms across the country to thoughtfully integrate AI. Could you talk about what that kind of means, like on your day-to-day and what you're doing?
Sure. Well, I'll go back. So one of the really special things about Adams Multimedia is we have, like I said, we're in 20 states, and we regularly meet the top regional editors within our different markets. And we just discuss what's going on, what news topics are big that we're dealing with, maybe some things that have come up as small as letters to the editor to special sections to major national news events and how we should be handling them. We have a good group who and a wide range of experience. And so being a part of that group has made the decision-making process pretty smooth as we face these new things. So AI, I guess maybe it was late 2023. We have a VP of content. Her name is Tracy Bauer. She's a fantastic journalist. She sent something out to that group of editors about AI integration in the newsroom. And as she tells it, I was the first person to respond to say, hey, this isn't a good idea. I'm not really sure how AI can work in news. At that point in my life, I'd really only seen ChatGPT used to make jokes on the internet. And that was pretty much the extent of my AI exposure. And I was fairly against the idea of it integrating. Well, wouldn't you know it? I also happen to be one of the more involved and active and outspoken editors in the group. And I have done a lot in the digital space, just somewhat because of my background and somewhat because I enjoy playing with stuff. So I had learned a little bit more about how our websites work on the back end as opposed to just using them as a content management system. And I've done stuff with video and audio in the past. So I was kind of naturally in a position to be pushed towards, hey, if we're going to send some people to AI training sessions, here, Eli, you're volunteered to do that. So after going through a couple sessions, some which were very informative, some which were, I would say, the type where you are there, but your eyes kind of glaze over and you find yourself looking at your second screen doing other things, I discovered that there might actually be a way that we can integrate these tools into our newsrooms. And so over the following months, we gathered a little committee of editors within that regional group. There were a couple of us who started meeting regularly, trying things out, using the different tools, figuring out how can we use these the right way to improve what we're doing in our newsrooms. As I know that it's probably been covered on your show a lot, when it comes to local news, one of the most common things that is happening year over year is they are shrinking. You may have had an editor or two editors and a team of reporters, photographers, copy editors 10, 15 years ago. But in a lot of markets now, you might have one person who is running the newsroom.
Mm-hmm.
They have to receive the letters of the editor. They have to receive the press releases. They have to go out and cover the school board meetings and all those different things. How can they possibly do everything? So a big focus for us has been, how can we take those mundane tasks off these editors' plates? How can we maybe bring some things back that left? I can recall growing up, I think my name was mentioned in the newspaper for high school activities, high school sports. But the one that sticks with me is in college, I got pulled over for speeding in a random small town on my way between my hometown and my college town. And I'll never forget that because I'm like, why would they print that? Well, that is something that people have enjoyed in local news for a long time. And it's something that has gone away, because they're not, of all the priorities, are you going to put things like that in there? Even still, probably not. But it's harder to do. Now, with tools, like Claude, like ChatGPT and things like that, you can run a police log through one of those programs and have it edited and formatted exactly how you want it to appear in your newspaper in just a few minutes. It's not taking a human being time to read through, filter out all the small things like speeding tickets for college kids, and putting in things that are maybe a little bit more, felony or, that you might actually care about printing. So those are the kind of things that we're focusing on for the most part. And I can get into more of what that looks like.
Yeah, I was going to ask you. I love the way you're thinking about it. I like talking to people that are in local news, local journalism, but also like kind of tech forward like you.
Mm-hmm.
Also, man, stop speeding. You won't be in the paper anymore. just
Hey, I learned my lesson.
That's
I'm
true.
a reformed citizen.
I'm just kidding. But so a lot of folks like in local news kind of think AI and they think ChatGPT, like Gen AI.
Yes.
Like, oh yeah, well, we're not going to use it to write our stories. And that's like not the exciting use case for me. You talked about finding the mundane activities for people in your organizations and, I don't know, making them efficient, eliminating them. What are like the top couple? The themes that come up with this show a lot when I ask people like reporters is Otter AI for transcriptions and like city council transcriptions and stuff and helping with headlines. But what other activities, like what are the top couple that like the highest value for you to make efficient use AI?
So for me, because I still oversee the military publications. I also oversee a wedding magazine and some other special publications over the years. And I've found AI has been very helpful in brainstorming. Part of the exciting thing about my jobs over the years is I've been able to be involved in a lot of different publications. But it's also difficult because there's a lot to juggle, and it can get, if they're happening at the same time, if I'm publishing a military magazine the same time as the wedding magazine and a couple other projects are going on, that's a lot to juggle. So it's been helpful to go to an LLM and say, how can I understand this process? One thing I do with the wedding magazine, for example, is I've used in the past, I have written questions to ask vendors, different wedding vendors, photographer, hair, makeup, you name it. Just a general question about the biz, about, the Chesapeake Bay region, for example. And then I see what their responses are. I collate them and put them into a nice spread. Well, I was finding myself a little bit with writer's block of what question could I ask? I'd already asked about weather. I'd asked about finances. And so I just put a couple of examples of ones I'd written. And I had Claude, in this example, give me several other questions that I've been able to use, moving forward with the publications. So brainstorming is a big one. There are, of course, other large cases. How to frame a cover photo shot. Something I'd been doing for years, but that's something that I just kind of learned on the job. That's not something that I ever did in school. It's not something I ever did working for a student newspaper. You just kind of learn, hey, here's this magazine, put it out with good covers. Oh, I need to consider, is there space around the subject? Is there whatever? And each time you're dealing with different people who look different, who maybe colors look different. So I've used AI to kind of help figure out, what do I need to focus on with this person in this career? What colors should I put them in? What fabric should I put them in? And it was more of an exercise of, how will this work, than I need help doing this. But it kind of showed that if this is the kind of thing you can be doing, what other ways can you use it that are similar?
When you need to build up your team to handle the growing chaos at work, use Indeed Sponsored Jobs. It gives your job post the boost it needs to be seen and helps reach people with the right skills, certifications, and more. Spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all your boxes. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. That's Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need a hiring hero? This is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs.
Very cool. That's a really good idea. I love the creative kind of use cases like that. In Adams newsrooms. So you work with kind of the whole company, all the different newsrooms, right?
Yes.
Your position. Okay. Like what specific tools does everybody use? The same ones? Does everybody at Adams use Claude, or everybody use ChatGPT? And can you name what tool, actual websites, whatever tools you're using? Is it mostly just like LLMs or
Yeah, Claude has been the main one, and I'll tell two funny stories about that. So at the time, I guess it was 2024, when we were really getting into what tools work, how do they work, what can we use them for. Claude was not connected to the internet, and so this is a perfect example of how quickly things change. So two funny stories with Claude. First of all, when we kind of started using these, we determined, is it going to be Claude? Is it going to be ChatGPT? At the time, we were pretty up in the air, and this was late 2024, getting into 2025. We finally decided, let's go Claude. Let's go this one. We liked that it wasn't connected to the internet, because we felt like the hallucinations of ChatGPT were getting too, that was going to be too dangerous for us in the publishing world, because all of a sudden, you could plug in a story and just say, hey, copy edit this. Next thing you know, you have a made-up quote, you have a source that is slid in there on the sly. So as we were kind of rolling this out and I was transitioning into this role, I went to one of our properties in Minnesota to do a training session. And the whole training session was just showing different tools, how they could be used, what people could use them for. It's pretty informal, but it's really impactful. And so we were all in on Claude because not connect the internet. And that's what I developed the training materials for. We thought that going into this training, that our newsroom that we were going to meet with should sign up for Claude ahead of time, because it would make it easier for them to follow along and try things on their own with what I was showing them. Now, I was going to show them ChatGPT. I show Perplexity. Pengram is one of my favorite things to show, because it's an AI detecting and text tool. And then a couple others that we've experimented with. But for the most part, that's where we were going to live. Well, a lot of the folks in the newsroom signed up for an account, but because they all had similar email addresses, they all got locked out. So my first training was to show Claude, which wasn't connected to the internet, and to have them follow along. Well, they couldn't anymore because they got locked out of Claude. And then a few weeks after that, Claude became connected to the internet. So that was kind of an adjustment. And we were talking about how fast AI changes. This is just kind of what shows it. At this point, it was 7 months ago. At that time, Claude wasn't connected to the internet. All of a sudden, Claude was connected to the internet. A couple months go by, and we're training on how you have to start a new conversation for every task, or you have to kind of remind Claude of things in each separate chat window. All of a sudden, Anthropic rolls out that the Claude has memory now. So if you do something in one chat, it learns from that and can apply it. So it is kind of fun. It's the besides the little snafu with the signups, it was a very good training session, which gave us a model for how we want to roll this out to newsrooms across the country. But it's difficult because things change. And in this space, in the AI space, it's not just change is happening and ongoing. Change is happening rapidly.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the next funny story, I was training our newsrooms in Washington on, just different AI tools. And literally during the training session, Anthropic unveiled that Claude could now generate graphics and images, which is something it had not been doing. So it's a new thing for me to learn. It's fun because I get to learn a lot and I enjoy that. I will say that I enjoyed school and I'm the type of person that did enjoy going to class. So in this way, it's kind of fun, but it can be intimidating too, because every day it seems like there's some new rollout. There's something new to keep up with. There's some new piece of a program we've been using for months.
Yeah, I second you on the Claude thing. I was using ChatGPT forever, and then I have a friend, kind of mentor friend, and he's like, "You got to get on Claude," and I have not turned back. It's the way he said that. He said that not OpenAI. ChatGPT is like the AOL of AI. It's like, yeah, it's a nice onboard.
Okay.
He's like, but if you're real, and I'm like, oh man, since I've gotten to Claude, it's so much more, this is anecdotal from my side. I can even code with it. It's crazy what it can do. So I concur with you on that. When you're doing these trainings, because it sounds like that's a big part of your job is trainings for the different newsrooms. I'm curious, since this is about local media and stuff, how is the reception from reporters, editors, the folks you're dealing with? I mean, people enthusiastic about it? Is there some hesitation? If you had to, it's a lot of different
both,
people, but yeah.
I'll try and give an example of what that looks like. So I'm painting a broad picture here. These are generalities I'm making. It's not true in every case, but for the most part, our older journalists are more interested and open-minded than the younger journalist.
Interesting.
Which I thought was interesting, but then I thought, at one time I was very skeptical of this, and now I'm kind of a convert. So you kind of go in with that. And then you also face, people have a real concern with, is this going to take my job? Is this going to replace me? And that's something that I think that's cross industries. It's not exclusive to journalism. And then one of the other things, which is I'm glad that they're concerned about, is transparency. How do we tell the audience when something is used? There's no perfect answer for that. I have shown that if I have had a press release, say it's from a police agency, and I have Claude rewrite it in the style of what a journalist would, and then I print that after me, the human being looking at it, of course, then I put a tag on that. I'll say this was edited by Claude, an AI program, and it was checked by an editor before being published. But if I'm doing some of that brainstorming stuff where I'm trying to find, what's a good business to feature, that does crabbing on Maryland's Eastern Shore, that's some kind of thing you'd use Google for, or I've used it to find local events to put in a magazine for a certain time period. What kind of Christmas events are coming up? Because ultimately what that looked like was, rather than me searching on Google and clicking around to different websites and Facebook pages, I used Perplexity to find events. And Perplexity, I explained to people, is like a supercomputer. And your listeners, I'm sure, know, because you cover this topic, so it's not something new. But that's the kind of way I explained. It's like a super Google, and it will find you and aggregate the information for you. So I took that information and then I ran it through Claude, because I might as well double check. Let's fact check. I narrowed down the list a little bit, and then I called. I did not put in that when it was published that AI was used. But what I did do was require the AI programs, and that's the fun thing is that I explained too, is prompting is the most important part of what you do. I had AI pull information and then cite its sources for each thing. And then I put the cited source as the citation in what we published, because that's where the information came from. And nobody would expect you to say, a reporter Googled information for the story. So like, back to the original question, that's one of the big topics that comes up, and that allays their fears. And one of the things too that is really important that I set the table with before getting into the training is I say, we're here to show you what tools exist, how you might use them, and how lots of other companies and organizations outside of our building might be using them, because you need to be aware. And that really helps get their guard down, because first of all, we're not going to say you are required to do something. We're also not going to come in and say, here's the way someone else is doing it in Tennessee. You need to do this in Ohio. Because what I've found is once I get their eyes open to what is possible, when I hear from, months later from those who have gone through training, they have come up with their own ideas of how to use it. And that's what the purpose of this is. If it were just me doing all the learning and then training people, here, use it this way, and that's how they were using it, that would be boring. We would not grow or advance. But because I'm kind of imparting this wisdom and this idea of, here's what you could do, you need to find how this can help you with your little world. And then they come back to me and teach me. It just makes it so much better.
Yeah, that's great. Like when you said, some folks are scared it's going to take their job. I was just listening to a podcast this morning, a kind of a businessy podcast. And they were saying there's a couple different kinds of employees or business owners, whatever. Like those are afraid it's going to take their job or their business. And those that are like, oh, I'm the jockey now. And this horse is like this AI engine underneath me. And like those people are going to crush it, if they can figure out how to, that's more the reality. You talked a little bit about prompting, and I'm taking advantage of this since you're teaching local newsrooms about this all the time. Do you have any tips on that is that something you talk about? Like, cause I've noticed how big of a difference a good prompt makes. Do you have any tips on that? Do you see differences between the different like platforms and stuff like that? Or
I try to make it clear that with these tools, you can pretty much make it do whatever you want. And when we first started, one of our key things to include in prompts was you tell Claude you need to act as a local newspaper editor and then do this and do this exactly. Well, it's hard for me now because I've been working with Claude so long. It inherently knows what I need for the most part, which is weird to say and to think about, but it's a good reminder that when I go to training, you kind of have to start at ground zero. And I've noticed too, a lot of the things I will show in training is the same thing done over and over again. And now with Claude knowing me so well and having the memory, I am a little bit worried that the results I get may look different than someone who's just starting out and doesn't have that base level figured out. So, we try to make it clear that you as the human being are the final stopgap and you can tell it if it's made a mistake. One of the training sessions I was leading at our Cedar Rapids group, somebody asked me, because I explained that there are many times where I will get a result which is not exactly what I'm looking for, or it's wrong, and I will correct the AI tool. And somebody asked, have you ever corrected it and been wrong? And I said, that's an interesting question. No. And that's not because I'm some genius. It's usually because I know for sure something isn't right. Like it's generated a headline idea and it's written it with all caps title case, which is not what we follow. And that's not AP style. So I was like, hey, you didn't do this in AP style. Oh, I'm so sorry. I forgot. You're right, Eli. A little dopamine hit from being complimented or by the AI program.
I've told all of mine, especially Claude, that worked the most with it, to not be a sycophant at all and don't suck up to me. And I have to remind, and then they say, okay, they're really good. And it always kind of drifts back. And I have to remind, because I just want direct stuff. That's another kind of funny challenge. It feels good, but I'm like, no, that's not what I want for my purposes.
Right. You don't want that. And I've noticed that there have been a few times where I've given it a very basic data point or something, and it will just write the longest response. And so I remember one time I was wanting to get some information on what stories that we have go in our newsletters are getting the most attention. And so I had to upload a few different spreadsheets that kind of showed like click rate. And what I wanted Claude to do, because this would have taken me so long, is to look at the story and figure out what kind of story was it. And so imagine weeks and weeks of data where you have all these newsletters that go out. How, what kind of stories seem to be getting the most attention? So I prompted Claude and I told it that I'm going to upload one thing at a time, and all I need you to say is, got it. Don't do anything yet until I'm done.
Right.
And it followed along. But before that, I had put some things in it. It automatically starts doing stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why, back to the original idea of prompting is sometimes you just have to write a longer prompt because it will get you what you need. And if you don't, it might start doing all sorts of stuff based on what it thinks you want. So I think your example that you mentioned of the jockey, that's a perfect one because a horse wants to run. It wants to go. And if we're not directly, directing it the right way, we could go anywhere.
Growing a successful business has never been easy. But whether you're navigating a complex industry or trying to reinvent one, our breadth of banking experts are here to collaborate on market-proven solutions. At KeyBank, we're built to grow with your changing needs because we're not just here for the business you are now, we're here for the business you'll become. Reimagine business as usual. KeyBank opens doors. Learn more at key.com/B2B.
Yeah, exactly. Very cool. I had this question in here, and I don't know, you've kind of answered it already, but I'll ask it anyway. And it might not be your role at Adams, but you've mentioned how much, efficiencies and mundane things is helping remove. Do you know if there's any cases of it helping? A big question for local news is generating more revenue becomes sustainable. Do you know if there's anything on your guys' radar, or if it's helping, actually land deals with advertisers or anything along those lines?
So, yeah, great question. It's supposed to. I won't go into specifics about some things we've tried or some of the programs we've used, but the first thing I did with AI was work on a podcast that took some of the top headlines from a newspaper that week, and we created a little 5-minute podcast out of it that came out on Friday mornings. It didn't work very well. We didn't get hardly any audience, but the goal was, hey, here's this thing that our advertising teams can sell ads into. It's a digital product. It's a podcast, and we put it out for free, wherever podcasts you can find, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and iTunes, and it just didn't grow. We put it on our website as well, but that was something that we thought we can attach a revenue opportunity to it.
Mm-hmm.
We're now working on a video option, which should be able to have local ads attached to it. And it just kind of remains to be seen. Some of these things, some of these tools, it seems like it is perfect for it, but it's got to make sense. And I'm not sure how people feel about it in the market. Some of the markets that we deal in, I said at the beginning, are mid-sized to small communities, and they can be large areas too. Growing up, you identified with your town. Well, in Maryland, for example, where we have a division of the Chesapeake, counties matter, which is a much bigger area. And so a lot of our newsrooms cover multiple counties, which is a wide range, wide market. And it's hard to know how people react to AI involvement in certain things. It may be cool that now we can have video. We've not had video before of the smaller newspaper. But if the market doesn't like it, it's not a good opportunity for revenue to be attached.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's because it's kind of the two big questions for this show is saving time, growing revenue, grow that sustainability for local news. But very cool.
Yeah, we'd love to. I mean, when you think about some of the, I mentioned at the beginning, some things we hope to see through using AI tools is having things maybe come back. Like I know that newspapers used to widely publish honor rolls or college dean's list and things like that. And I know that many newspapers that I'm aware of don't do that anymore. Is there a way that AI could bring that back? And if so, is there a sponsor from a local business who wants to, specifically hit that market of high school parents, or college age parents or college age students? That's the kind of thing I think that could happen. It's just kind of hard to make that happen in practice.
Mm-hmm. This one, I asked this to everybody. It's going to be a tough one, just based on the pace things are moving at with AI right now. But flash forward 5 years. Where do you see yourself, Adams, as like a company and just like this whole kind of AI ecosystem? And like considering it's felt like years in the last 2 months, it might be a hard one to answer. So, but yeah.
It is hard because it's hard to imagine, given what's happened in the last 6 months with AI, competing for government contracts, unveiling new tools every few months. It's getting faster. The time between updates is shrinking. So it is hard to imagine what 5 years down the road looks like. My hope is, and what a big part of I'm working towards is, if we can get these tools to not only help make some of these mundane tasks easier, are we able to do the kind of journalism that makes people believe in newspapers? One of the things that, I'm going to get a little bit off topic, but one of the things that bothers me is the idea that media is this one entity and that it is fake or false for whatever reason. And something I try to convey any chance I get is that local news is not national news. These people live in these communities and they care about these things and they report on them to help you make informed decisions. And local elections, whether it's, just keeping you informed on the local high school sports teams, that's really important and no one else can do that. And so it's really important that we are doing the kinds of things that our readers care about. Something that is very difficult to maintain in a smaller newsroom is some of the digital focus stuff. So right now, you may have social media channels for newspaper, Instagram, Facebook, and X, we'll say. But if nobody's able to use them to gain traffic, draw traffic to the website or keep the brand name relevant, then it's going to be very hard to get new subscribers. You'll keep the ones who are used to the print product and maybe an emailed newsletter or the e-edition they can find on the website. How are you drawing in new eyes and new dollars? Our journalists are able to use AI tools to get through some of their work quicker. Maybe they have an opportunity to go make a 30-second video of the human being, them, and put it on Instagram and connect to the audience that way. So my hope is we're able to continue to adapt and use these AI tools to make our journalists free to write more enterprise stories, do more things in the digital space. One of the cool things that we've been working on is adding an editor intro to our newsletters that go out. So this is kind of the opposite side of the coin. We're working on using AI tools to make our journalists' life easier and to take some of those routine, mundane, tedious tasks off their plate. But in this example with our newsletter, we're trying to do something that's digital focused, that actually requires a little bit more work from a human being, but it's making a difference. We're seeing a lot more traffic to our sites thanks to these editor intros. Because newsrooms aren't as big as they used to be, it's more difficult for them to be out in the public at every little thing. Back in the day, reporters would be at all the different events, ribbon cuttings, parades, little festivals, conferences, speeches, things like that. Now, you find yourself in a newsroom at the beginning of the week saying, we don't have someone that can get to that. Well, because those gaps are missing, people in the community are attending these events and aren't used to a reporter face being there. With these newsletter intros, it's kind of like, hey, we're still here. Here's what we've done this week. It helps to solidify we are in the community and here's how we're participating.
Very cool. Man, you've given me a lot to think about. Eli, this has been great. Where can people find you and Adams online? What do you want me to link to or promote in the show notes?
Yeah, adamsmultimedia.com. You can see where our markets are. If you're out there listening and you don't subscribe to a local newspaper, even if we're not in your market, I recommend you getting involved with the local newspaper in one way or another. Maybe it's picking up a copy at a gas station. Maybe it's subscribing to the e-edition or getting the free newsletter, whatever they put out so that you are informed. It's honestly something I regret not caring about as much in some of my mid-years between growing up. I cared about newspapers in high school and younger, and then in college, and I worked for one, so it's always kind of been a part of it. But when I was not in journalism for those couple of years, I did not pay attention to local news like I wish I would have. And I think that that's something that people need to get plugged into. So I definitely encourage that. And adamsmultimedia.com. Selfishly, I'll make a small plug. I started my career working for those military publications. That's still a part of my responsibilities even to this day. So I always like to shout that out, dcmilitary.com. We do pretty cool stuff with the local military communities in the greater DC metro area. So I have to plug that.
Of course. Yeah. I'll link to all that stuff and everything. Awesome. Eli, this has been great, man. Thank you for coming on here. I appreciate it.
Thank you. It's been great.
Yep, thanks. Thank you for listening to Small Press Big Ideas. You can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you'd like to help the show, the best thing you can do is to tell a friend or colleague and just take a few minutes to leave a rating and a review on whatever platform you're listening to right now. It only takes a minute out of your day, but it really does help the podcast grow and reach more ears. Check back for new episodes every Monday.